It's so real. Hey y'all, I'm James Wright and welcome to my shop. A few years ago I had got this kit of a cardboard, and it's basically a 3D pair of glasses, and they come with the lenses and a magnetic switch on the side, and you can just hold them up and put your phone into it, and for like $5 you can have your own VR set that you can use your own cell phone. And I really like the Google Cardboard concept. Now if you want to see one of these kits, I'll leave a link down to one of them below. But I like it, but it's cardboard, and I'm a woodworker, so I wanted to make a woodworking set. And I made this about a year ago with my old shop setup, and so a lot of the footage from this is older. I'm sorry for that, but it's kind of cool to look back and see what the video style was and I used to shoot for. And I built all of this except for the snap on the top, and I just used a rubber band for over a year to use this, and yes, I still use this set, and it fits me perfectly, and it's wooden, it's carved, it's out of purple heart and white oak, and yeah, I really like it. I use it every day, but let's take a look at how I made it. Most of this will be made from scrap I have left around the shop from other projects. Of course, purple heart and sepele, and then the one that everyone didn't quite see coming, white oak. I'm going to be using the Google Cardboard I have to use that basically as the measurement and template to size everything off of. Most all the pieces will be resawed down to 1/4 inch. Quite a few of the pieces I had were already 1/4 inch, but in this case I wanted to pull from this block and a piece of firewood, so they're going to need to be resawed down. But rather than resawing them completely, I'm going to cut them down to a smaller size to make the resawing easier. The less you have to resaw, the better. So I can start by cutting off a true edge that I can then mark off of. I'll use a marking gauge to actually get the measurement from my phone that will be fitting into it rather than from the Google Glass, and we'll just kind of adjust some of the sizes to fit that. That way I know it'll fit my phone and the way I work with it. Then I can rip the board down to that width, or that height actually, and making sure that all the boards that are then that same dimension tall. Once I have it ripped to a general size, then I can come in and resaw it down. Now if you notice that this board isn't quite as thick as it was before, because I already resawed off a 1/4 inch piece, and here I'm going to resaw off another 1/4 inch piece, and this will leave a piece in between that is a little bit thinner than an 1/8 inch. So basically a nice little piece of veneer. And I think I used that in another project, but a year ago I can't remember for the life of me. So it's a fairly simple process. I hadn't built my frame saw at the time, and so I was just using a handsaw. I'll just follow the line down the board, and as I cut, I'm only going to be cutting on my side of the board. And so as you see, the saw is tilted up with the handle down towards the floor, and I'm going to follow down the line until the far side gets down to its line, and then I'll flip it over so that I'm always cutting on my side of the board. So the saw will start out flat, and as I cut, the handle will come down and down and down until I cut at an angle. This way I know I'm always following the line. I can always see the line I'm cutting on, and I can adjust as needed so I can get a really nice straight cut. And it's a fairly straightforward process. Follow the line, stay straight, and occasionally stop, flip it over, and keep cutting. It really only takes about 10 minutes or less, and you can cut down this board. Actually, I think these were only like 6 minutes a piece. They're pretty quick to cut through, even with white oak. And with one more stroke, pop, I have a piece of veneer and a 1/4 inch piece that I can use for the Google Glass. Nice clean surface, I'm happy. I do have another piece that I'm going to be using that's a hunk of firewood. I really like working with firewood because it's riven. You get the ray figure in it. Very, very beautiful wood. And in this case, I'm just going to plane down one side, smooth it out, and then just like before, I'm going to resaw it. So now that I have a smooth side, I can use the marking gauge and track a line all the way around it, and then use the saw to follow the line, and I'll have another piece I can use. That's that piece on the bottom there. Now I have all of the pieces cut to their general size. I want to get exact sizes on them, and so I'm kind of laying them out and figuring what pieces I want to use where, and how is this actually going to work together. Once I have all those pieces figured out, I can start by trimming off one end so that I have a nice square edge to work from, so that I know that one end of the piece is perfect and I can measure off of that. So after drawing the line, I can then cut it to length. And then from then on, it's just cutting all these pieces to the sizes to match the Google Cardboard. Some of the pieces, the piece I needed to take off was too small to cut. the saw just wouldn't stay in that small space. So rather than cutting it with a saw, it's just easier to grab a plane and plane it down. Basically, my rule of thumb is 1/4 inch or less. I'm probably going to plane it off because it's just faster to grab a plane and clean it out, and then you're done. The planing, it leaves a smooth surface that you can work from. A lot of the connections between these pieces are going to be in grooves, dados, and rabbets. So for most of those, I'm just going to use a marking knife to mark out where the dado needs to be. And with that in place, then I can come in with the router plane and carve out that groove. Router plane is a lot of fun to work with, and then you have a groove that it sits nicely in. Now, one of the most interesting pieces on this is the faceplate. This is what the glass, the eye pieces fit into. And the glass that needs to fit in there is round, but it needs to go into the wood but not fall all the way through. So you're going to be creating a round ledge that it sits on. And in order to do this in the wood, I traced out exactly where they need to be from the Google Cardboard. And then I came in with a brace and bit that is the same size as the diameter of the glass piece. So basically, I'm going to be drilling down just a little ways, and I'm really only going to be running until these spurs cut into the wood a little ways. Just when the blades of the auger connect with the wood, I'm going to stop. And this way, I'm only digging down a little less than an eighth of an inch. Then I'll come in with a chisel and remove that material in between. So the knickers are basically just creating a cut mark that I can then chisel out to. Those glass pieces will then fit into that slot and sit there nicely. Then from the other side, I'm going to come through with a smaller auger, and this will create a hole that the glass won't fall through. Now you have to be very, very careful here to completely mess up and drop the bit on the floor. That really helps the process, but in the end, I'm left with a fairly smooth hole and something I'm happy with. Just had to be careful. One more thing to learn. Oh well. Now that I've cut the hole for the glass and the glass can sit in that little recess, I need to start cutting out the nose pieces and the bridge that connects with your forehead, and there's a piece that connects with your cheeks. There's just a lot of little pieces that have to be cut out to fit with the natural form of your face. I'm going to come in here with a coping saw or a fret saw and slowly clean it out. Now, a lot of people have problems with this, and they veer one way or the other, and that's often because you're over controlling the saw. You tend to put a lot of force into the saw, and you're trying to make it cut. Think about taking force off of the saw, and you'll find that it cuts much easier. You can follow the line quicker. Everything just seems to fall into place if you're not over controlling the saw. So I'm slowly going to come through all these pieces. This particular piece is the divider that sits on top of the nose in front of the faceplate so that your eyes can't see the image on the opposite side. And all of these pieces then get carved to fit your face. And so you can actually size them and check your face and see if it's what you want. Now, one of the more interesting things is a magnetic switch that's on the side of this, and it allows you to, it's basically a button. There's a magnet that recesses on the inside, and you can see a hole coming through where I've augered out. And on that side, I basically just did what I did before and just let the spurs cut a round hole. And so it's only recessed in about 1/16 of an inch, so that the magnet can sit in that round hole on the other side. On this side, there needs to be an oval so that the magnet can slide down. And there's going to be a thin piece of wood left between those two magnets so that they're still held in place. But as you pull the magnet down, the phone senses that, and it basically becomes a button. It's a really cool setup on these that I really kind of liked. But just cutting out the oval and cleaning it out. Now we can move on to the other pieces, and once you've actually roughed them out with the saw, I like to come in with a file and clean them out. It really doesn't take that much time, and a file will leave a really nice smooth surface that you can work on. And you get a flatter surface than you would with sandpaper. Now for the outside cover on this, I want to do something special. So I have this hunk of purple heart that I book matched it, so each side of this is matching. Well, the problem with book matching is that the grain goes the opposite direction on the other piece. So using a cabinet scraper really cleans this up quickly, and you can end up with a really nice smooth surface that you're ready to work from. And you can see these curls, they're just gorgeous, thin little curls. I love a cabinet scraper. Now we can actually test this thing. Once I have all the pieces cut and I can fit them together, I can see, is it comfortable? Does it fit on my face? What do I need to change? What do I need to address? And I can go through and make all those adjustments now before glue up. One other thing I need to do is make a spot for the straps to connect to the piece. And basically I need to create little slots that the leather strap can go through and then tie into on the other side. So I drill out a whole bunch of holes and then run the drill back and forth to remount the space. This clears up most of the material and can leave me with a really nice clean slot about 1/8 inch wide. and then I can come in with a chisel and just clean it out a little bit, get rid of all the wisps and things that the drill was not able to clean out. And with that, I have a really nice long oval slot that the strap can go into and connect to the piece. Now, this is the tricky part. The glue up on this I knew was going to be kind of hairy because there's a lot of little pieces, very shallow grooves that they all sit in, and it just kind of was a bit tenuous. And I had to be very, very careful with how everything was put together. I'm just using simple wood glue, and I had to be very careful to really mess it all up like that. Yeah, what he said. But with a bit of patience and the proper amount of clamping pressure and clamping types, I was able to get this whole thing glued up and ready to work on. After letting it sit overnight, I can pull it out and play with it, make sure that it all fits and it's exactly what I want. This is the first time I actually get to experiment with it and see it, and yeah, I'm happy. Needed to do a little bit of modifications to make it smooth and fit with the face, so I did a good bit of rasp and file work, cleaned it all out, smoothed off the surfaces, and made sure it felt good on the face. Then, of course, my favorite finish, boiled linseed oil and paste wax. I do have several videos on applying this if you want to see that. It's just great for hand things. You know, boxes like this, I could use shellac or a polished finish, but I really like the look of boiled linseed oil. It's a simple finish that you can't mess up. On to the front face of this, I wanted to do some carving. Now this was back before I really did a lot of carving, and I was still kind of learning and experimenting at this time. But even with just a simple bench chisel and a knife, I was able to do this Celtic weave. And I do have a couple old videos on how I do all of this carving with just a bench chisel. You really don't need a lot of fancy tools. A bench chisel and a carving knife will allow you to do a lot of really cool and interesting things. And it's just a slow process of working through it. It took me about an hour. Actually, I think this one was about 45 minutes, if I remember correctly, to carve it out. Slowly coming in, removing all little pieces here and there, and you end up with a really nice finished surface when you're done that you can be proud of. Now, to attach this front cover to the main box, I want to create a hinge. This hinge will be made out of leather, but to connect the leather to the actual box, I need to use contact cement. The contact cement, you have to let it tack up and get sticky, and then you can put it all together. When it touches and you work it down, it does not move, and it's a bond that will last for a very, very long time. It's been sitting there well for over a year now. Once that cures and dries, then I can cut off the excess, and I'm left with a really nice hinge. For all of the other straps and connectors, I'm going to be using this thin piece of leather, and I can cut off strips that most of them are about 1 inch wide that will connect back and forth across the head. And then I'm going to be stitching them all together. So I have this punch that punches out 4 holes wide for stitching, and then I'm going to come in with a needle and thread and sew them all together. This is a clasp that I salvaged from an old belt, and that clasp will then go in the back of the head so I can size it exactly what I need. With a bit of waxed thread, we can come through and saddle stitch it. I'm just going to use a single needle saddle stitch and tie it all together. Works fairly well, fairly quick process, and you're left with a thing you can be very proud of. I'm going to be connecting it to either side of the head, and so there's a strap that goes from either side around the back, another strap that comes from the top front that goes over the top of the head to make sure that it doesn't fall down on your head, and then there's one more strap that closes the lid on it. And so it sounds like there's a lot in there, but really not. Just a few connection points and sew it all together. For the eyepieces and the glass, I'm just going to be using a bit of this silicone glue and let that wiggle down in there, and I can pop the glass in place. Now, a year later, I'm going to be putting in the snap to close the lid. This is just a rivet on snap. I'll leave a link to it down below. A fairly simple snap, and it holds the whole thing together. I put the phone in there and it just kind of stretches it. Since it's been a year, I decided to put on another coat of boiled linseed oil and paste wax, and I'm really, really happy with how this came out. It looks great. It works well. It is a functional piece of Google cardboard, or Google wood, I guess you would call it. And I really like how it came out. No one else has one quite like what I do, and I'm looking forward to using it for years to come. So there you go. When you're stuck with cardboard, maybe you can make something a little bit better. It really wasn't that big of a deal. I think I made it in the course of like 2 days. And at this point of woodworking, I hadn't been actually woodworking that long, so it's not that difficult a task. Even with the carving and the leather work, it's a very simple project that works very well and holds together well. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I do want to say thank you to the patrons on Patreon. You guys are the reason why I can keep putting out content like this. If you'd like to find out more about Patreon or help out with that, you can do so right down here. Also, if you want to subscribe or see some behind the scenes footage, you can do that as well. That's about it for today. And until next time, have a wonderful day.